This video is sponsored by War Thunder. More on that later. As of this video's release, there are 172 champions in League of Legends. That's a lot, so I enlisted the help of an army of one-tricks to teach me their coolest tips, tricks, and combos for their favourite champion. We'll start all the way at A for Aatrox and go down the list to Z for Zyra. I'm going to painstakingly add timestamps as well for every single champion to the video description to make it easy for you to find. Okay, let's get straight into it. On Aatrox, when you get in range to use your W on your opponent, Aatrox will actually pull his sword out like this. This only works if you have vision of the enemy though, so you can actually tell if you're standing on a ward based on whether or not the Aatrox pulls his sword out. Ahri's R has an internal lockout that prevents you from spamming it too quickly, but if you get a takedown while mid-dash, it will reward you another charge that works independent of this lockout cooldown, meaning if an enemy dies as your mid-dash, you can do a double or sometimes even a triple dash. On Akali, when you use your E, you'll hop backwards a small distance, but if you E-flash with the perfect timing, you won't hop back at all. This is great because it keeps you in range for a follow-up R, which allows you to do some pretty cool combos. Akshan can be a really good counter to champions that go invisible, since while ulting an enemy, they get revealed for your teammates. On Alistar, 2 ticks of your E is all you need to CC chain into your combo. So if the enemy melee support is getting over eager and gives you a few stacks of it, once you see 2, you can flash combo the enemy EDC, and your combo will now perfectly CC chain into your E stun. On Ambessa, after using your ult, your character will do an attack and then a small hop, but this hop slows down your ability to do burst damage. The best combo to therefore do is to ult an enemy, initiate a right click to attack them, and then press S on your keyboard to initiate a stop command. This will cancel the dash, which frees you up to more quickly use other abilities instead of wasting time dashing for no reason. Amumu can use his Q to override displacement effects, so something like Blitzcrank's grab can be overridden if you throw your Q beforehand and it makes contact with the target after you were grabbed by whatever it is that's trying to pull you away. On Anivia, you can avoid certain death if you just start TP before you turn into an egg. TP will continue channeling and take you to safety while you're an egg, and your opponent will just be left disappointed. On Annie, if you want to surprise your opponent, do this combo. Press Q on your opponent, then flash forward. Your Q will automatically cast the moment you get into range by using flash, giving them no time to react. Keep in mind as well that you can throw your Q while only having 3 stacks to your passive. If you use E while the missile is mid-air, it will still stun as it'll actually be the 4th spell that hits. On Aphelios, when you run out of ammo, it sucks, because you can't attack while changing weapon. Therefore, when you have less than 10 ammo, use your Q and then ult. Your ult will use the new gun that you're just about to get, so keep track of what it is, but doing this allows you to cast your ultimate during a period where you otherwise wouldn't be able to use auto attacks because you're in the animation of swapping weapon, completely avoiding that downtime. On Ashe, make sure to use W to slow your opponent before throwing R since it's easy to hit. W and E can also both be used to somewhat master animation of throwing your R or make the enemy think that you're throwing your R, and they can also be used to perform a 360 no-scope. Nice. If Aurelion Sol flashes while channeling Q, his Q will be cancelled. But, if Aurelion Sol is using W to fly past while channeling Q, and then he flashes, his Q will continue to channel, which is a great way to gap close when you're stuck pointing one direction and you need to divert to go to another. It's easy to forget that Aurora's Q creates an additional projectile for every single target that's hit on the rip back. This pullback effect when hitting an entire minion wave can do way more damage than the actual initial projectile, so make sure to look out for those opportunities to Q a wave and then pull them back into your opponent for massive damage the same way you would on Zyra. On Azir, you can place a soldier, E to it, and then redirect your soldier mid-air with Q to follow it the full way. This can be combined with your ultimate to do a massively long distance Shurima shuffle without even putting yourself in danger. Just press E, then Q, then R mid-air. The timing's tight, but if you make it work, god it looks cool. Here's a secret strat I learned on one of Bartonet's shorts. If you ulti one of your towers, even one that's untargetable, it will actually give you kill credit for an enemy who's trying to execute themselves. Thanks for teaching me that one, Bartonet. Tu es un génie. On Bel'veth, you can dash with Q and flash on top of an opponent to deal damage to them with the Q. This is interesting because if you run out of dashes towards the target, you can dash away from them and flash backwards, still inflicting damage in a life or death situation. Have you ever wondered why people can flash out of your Blitzcrank hook at times? Well, it's because they have tenacity items, and Blitzcrank's hook has a stun on the end. If they have tenacity items, make sure to use hook first, then ult to silence them. That'll buy you time to use your E to punch them to knock them up, since we all know that if you hook first then punch, they'll have time to get off a flash because of that tenacity. Here's the best combo you can do on brand to one-shot someone. Open with Q flash, then E them before the Q hits, and follow up with W and R, and run into melee range so that your R bounces back and forth more quickly. On Braum, when jumping to a teammate with W, you can't cast your Q and you can't cast your R, but you can still cast your E shield. But if you cast your E while mid-air using W, it unlocks the ability to cast Q and R again. This is extremely useful when trying to save a teammate because it means you can more quickly throw an R to knock up enemies who are trying to kill them in a pinch. Using Briar's W, she can jump over some pretty large walls, larger than you'd think. My favourite spot is probably this bit here, where you can flank onto an enemy who's trying to defend their tier 2 tower. When sieging a tower on Caitlyn, you want to leave a small wall with your traps. When the enemy goes for last hits on caster minions, they'll have to go in front of the wall, and then you can close it behind them, trapping them with you. This is really good to do on that small space between the tower and the edge of the map. Wait for them to walk past, and then close that gap behind them as well. Here's a combo you can do on Camille that almost no one utilizes. If you E onto an enemy, and then cast W as you connect with them, it will push them in the direction you casted your W in. This allows you to reposition enemies exactly where you want them to, or perform an insect kicking the enemy back into your team the same way you would on Lee Sin. Kiting on Cassiopeia is easier than ever if you use this trick. Right-click to initiate a movement command, and then just spam E on your opponent. Your character will continue walking the direction you told it to initially, allowing you to just spam E without giving yourself carpal tunnel. Here's a couple quick tips for Cho'gath. You can use W Flash in order to catch an enemy by surprise with your silence. You can also use R Flash in order to instantly eat them upon flashing on top, just like we learned on Annie. But the weirdest of all, if you're big enough and stand directly on top of a ward while you clear it, your E spikes will actually shoot backwards. So, I guess there's that. Even though Corki's a ranged champion, in all lanes and lane you want to get into melee range on top of your opponent to hit your W. Corki's W leaves a trail of fire and it's one of the highest damage abilities in the game, with 150 base damage at rank 1 and a 200% AD scaling and 150% AP scaling. With stacks of Conqueror on board, these scalings go nuts, meaning that Corki is one of the best all-in ADCs if you can get into melee range. As Darius, here's what it looks like if you use E and let your character attack automatically. And here's what it looks like if you E and then right-click your opponent. As you can see, the attack comes out faster if you make sure to initiate an attack command after the enemy gets pulled. Using this trick, you can actually pull off an undodgeable combo. Use your W before you pull the enemy, E and then right-click them to make the auto come out faster, and then instantly use Q. If you do this quickly enough, your Q will go off before the stun from your E finishes, meaning your opponent can't flash out of it. When playing as Diana, you need to make sure to press your body up against an inhibitor when attacking it. If you stand far back like this, you won't get the bonus damage from your passive hit, but if you take a step closer, when you get that passive hit, it'll deal the bonus damage. When playing as Dr. Mondo, there's only one combo you need to know. Auto E Titanic Hydra, and that will delete them. Draven's ultimate will fly out globally until it hits an enemy, at which point it will come back to him, hitting them twice on the way back. But if you reactivate his ultimate just before it makes contact, it'll actually come back more quickly, making it easier to hit the second part of the ult on the enemy and inflict twice as much damage. You know how Riot changed teleport, and now you become a projectile that flies across the map? Well, Echo can make a really creative use of this using his ultimate if you have good timing. Obviously, this becomes way harder to do once you get past 10 minutes since it's really hard to aim, but you can effectively use your teleport to get you anywhere on the map even if you don't have somewhere to TP to, as long as you can travel through the place you want to get to. This Elise trick is completely useless, but it gives you style points. If you attack in range form and swap at the correct time, you actually do a ranged melee auto. There's no benefit to doing this, it just looks cool. On Evelynn, it takes a long time to re-enter stealth after fighting, about 4 to 5 seconds, but if you use your ultimate, this instantly resets that timer down to just over a second, so it's a lot faster to re-enter stealth after ulting. Ezreal's abilities aim themselves. If you hit a target with E, and use any of your other spells without moving your mouse, it will automatically aim for you at the champion that your E just hit. If you play Fiddlesticks, you need to know how to do this mechanic. While channeling ult, if you use W on an enemy and then flash forward, all targets hit by your W after flashing will also be feared even though they didn't get hit by your ult. The same can be done with your E. Cast ult, queue up your E, and then flash forward, and again, the targets that get hit by your E will still be feared even though they're massively out of the range of your ult. Doing this allows you to gap close and fear onto enemies that are way further away than your normal engage range. Now real quick, let's talk about the video sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most in-depth vehicle combat game ever made, and it's available for you to play right now for free on PC, console, and mobile devices. In War Thunder, you get to take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, ranging from the biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to fighter jets and main battle tanks of the modern day. But my favorite feature of all is gotta be the customization. I love my skins when it comes to gaming, but War Thunder takes all of this to the next level, offering a customization system with countless camouflages, historical markings, and the ability to make some really fun decorations for all types of vehicles, including some community-made ones that I love. So, immerse yourself fully in the intense combat of War Thunder, where incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects all come together to place you in control of the world's most powerful war machines. And join a worldwide community of over 95 million players in epic PvP battles today, and delve into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. With an unmatched wealth of high-quality content to discover, there's simply no game better suited for fans of military history. So check out War Thunder today. It's completely free to play on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. Use my links in either the pinned comment or the video description below to sign up, and if you're a new player or a returning player who hasn't played in the last 6 months, you'll also receive a massive bonus pack on PC or console. This pack includes multiple premium vehicles and the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, as well as 100,000 Silver Lions and 7 days of premium account. This is only available for a limited time though, so don't forget to claim it now. On Fiora, your vital spawns will always alternate what side of the enemy they spawn on. So if the last one spawned on either the top or to the right, then the next one will always spawn on the bottom to the left, and this pattern basically repeats itself forever. Remember as well that if you go far enough away from your opponent, the vital will disappear, and when it reappears, it will again change sides. So in the middle of lane, if the vital is stuck on the other side of your opponent, you can just walk away and come back, and now the vital will be on the same side that you are, making it way easier to hit. On Fizz, you can throw your ultimate while dashing with your Q. This makes it basically impossible to see the animation of your ult being casted, so use this to catch an enemy off guard. Here's how to get push on any matchup playing Galio. Wait until all of the minions arrive in lane and then aggro. Approach the wave from the side and throw your Q like this. Each side of your Q will hit the melees and the casters respectively, allowing you to hit all 6 minions at once. Here on Gangplank, my first barrel detonates doing 155 damage. Now my second barrel blows up, this time dealing 236. So why is this? Well, it's because Gangplank can store Sheen procs in his barrels. If you prep a barrel and auto-attack it with Sheen, it stores that Sheen inside the barrel. Later, if you detonate it, it does the bonus damage of the Sheen. This allows you in the trade to proc your Sheen once with your Q, and then hit the enemy with the barrel while Sheen's on cooldown, but still inflict that bonus damage from the item because you have one stored inside the barrel. Most people on Garen do this. They open with Q and then they spin. But in a lot of situations, it's better to do this. Spin first, and while spinning, activate your Q. You can activate Q while in your E animation, giving you move speed to stay in range. Then when the E finishes, you can finish with Q. This is good because every spin of your E gives you 2 stacks of Conqueror, allowing you to stack your Conqueror in about a second, giving you a bunch of bonus attack damage that can make your Q do way more damage. It's good to remember you can cast your Gnar ultimate while mid-air using your E, so don't wait until you get to the finish line. You can throw an enemy back halfway through. When you Grag Assault an enemy, it pushes them away, but the closer they are to the center of the explosion, the further they get pushed, so keep this in mind when doing your combos. Graves' ultimate has a huge wind-up effect which leaves you vulnerable, therefore what you should do is auto, ult, and then E. This way you'll be mobile while casting ult. If you do this directly on top of an enemy, it'll actually dash you to the other side of them, and basically insect kick you back, cutting off their escape. On Gwen, you can activate your W and then dash over thin walls, and this makes you basically invulnerable to any types of damage. Around Dragon and Baron Pit, this makes you basically impervious to damage, making it super easy to steal against an opponent, even if the odds are stacked against you. I think most people don't actually know how Hecarim works, so here's the rundown. Everything you see between the 2 long indicators is going to take damage from the dash, but only targets within that circle you see are going to get feared. So you can either place a circle far away and fear targets far away, or you can place it close to you and fear targets close to you. Either way though, everything in that line will still take damage. On Heimerdinger, it's possible to throw your E and then place a turret before the E hits, giving that turret a super attack since you're E connected. This is also possible if you quickly use ult and place an empowered turret, giving you the massive attack of the big turret. Here's an intended feature you can abuse on Hwei. If you EQ flash, there's a specific timing where your projectile will actually come from the new location of your flash, but visually it won't display it. You can use this to either hit an opponent who's far outside your range without them seeing it, or to curve the bullet around an enemy, which just looks really stupid. Alawi can use her W to hop over walls if there's a target on the other side. This is most useful on Gromp, but there's a bunch of places throughout the map where this can be done, so take advantage. On Aurelia, holding your W makes it so your passive stacks don't fall off, which can be a good way to stall time until you find something to attack. Oh, and if you use EWE, it makes it really hard to see where your E's going. Not that useful unless you're against something with a wind wall, but could be a good way to disguise it and get your stun through. Did you know Ivern's had the fastest full clear of any champion in the game for years now? Well, it makes sense because he can do this trick. How stylish. Here's how Janna's Tornado works. When you use Q the first time, it begins charging, and when you press Q again, it releases the tornado. So if you want to cast it quickly, you have to press Q twice in quick succession, but this means there's a delay. Therefore, what you can do is go into your settings and bind your Q key a second time. In this case, I bound it to 1 on my keyboard. Now I can press Q and 1 at the same time, and both inputs will make my Q cast faster. When you compare this trick with pressing Q twice, you can see the tornado comes out way faster, making it easier to stop those dashes. Here's a super stylish Jarvan combo you just have to take advantage of. This one lets you clown on your opponent. Start by EQing in, then ult your opponent and flash out. Your ult will trap them on top of your flag, and once your Q comes back up, you can re-engage with it and finish them off. How cool. Something most people don't know about Jax is that his E actually does more damage if it blocks attacks while he's doing his Beyblade. Therefore, when trading in early levels, you want to make sure to attack your opponent while channeling E. That way you block the attacks from minions, thus increasing the damage that you do with it. This is a great way to get push because not only does it do a bunch of damage to the wave, but it causes your minions to stay alive since you're basically tanking damage for them. A lot of runes and items in the game grant additional effect if your champion is considered melee. Therefore on Jace you can start a ranged auto attack and then swap into melee form, and here you can see I receive 2 stacks of Conquer instead of 1 since I'm a melee champion. One of the best combos to do on Jace then is to start an auto attack in range form, then press W to gain attack speed and swap to melee. You can jump on your opponent, your ranged attack will give you 2 stacks of Conqueror, then your Q and your follow-up 3 autos with the attack speed will instantly full stack Conqueror, putting you to 12 stacks in under a second. If you're playing Jhin and your 4th shot is about to expire, stress not. You can refresh the timer for when you're going to reload by using any ability. So you can essentially walk the entire distance of the map just spamming traps on the ground every 15 seconds and your 4th shot will never run out. Jinx's ultimate has a huge wind-up and it's really obvious when she uses it. But if you just throw out your traps and then use ult, it disguises the animation of ulting completely. And there are some pretty cool combos you can do here. Cassante is an interesting champion because he gains bonus damage based on his armor and magic resists, therefore he can do an insane combo with Aftershock. Proc Aftershock with W, then ult while Aftershock is active. This makes you do way more damage and an insta full charge W will basically one-shot people. On Kai'Sa, stopping to evolve your abilities is a complete waste of time. Instead, click the ability and instantly activate your E. This will overwrite the evolve and allow you to do it while moving, so you can upgrade your ability and still run out of base on time. Throwing a mantra Q like this is one of the most common mistakes I see Karma players make. The best way to use it is in conjunction with auto attacks. The second part of your Q detonating forces your opponent into a difficult situation. When they get hit by it, if you're attacking them, they either run away and take attacks for free without trading back, or they stand still and continue trading back but get hit by both parts of your Q. Either way, it's a lose-lose, so always combine your mantra Q in early levels with auto attacks. Have you ever pinged Karthus Q before? Because if you have, you'll notice it has charges. Well, this actually gives us a bit of a hint on how we're supposed to clear our jungle. Start off by queuing, then do 1 auto attack. Then do 2 Qs and an auto attack. 1 Q, auto attack, 2 Qs, auto attack. This is the natural pattern that will make the best use of the hidden charges of Karthus Q. Oh, and you can do Rift Herald from over a wall. How ridiculous is this? When playing as Kassadin, if the cooldown of your E goes down and this indicator displays on your ability bar, it means that someone's nearby. Enemies who use abilities and reduce the cooldown of your E will always reduce the cooldown of your E, even if you don't have vision of them, which can tip you off that an enemy is just around the corner, especially useful when you're trying to find their jungler. When using E on Katarina, where you aim your mouse is really important, because you will teleport to exactly where it goes, and the range around a dagger teleport is very forgiving. What this means is that you can teleport across a lot of walls around the map. You can throw down a W and TP over the wall even though the dagger didn't fall on that side of it, and it's really quick to do. There's only 3 champions that can do this. Caitlyn, Tristana, and Kayle can hit the Baron over the wall from the other side. but this can also be done with Dragon, once she's level 16 and she has her ranged form. Kayn's Q has a super long cast time, but if you use Q into a very thick wall, it'll cast instantly. Therefore, when clearing your jungle camps, make sure to always pull your camps next to big walls and use your Q into them. You'll have less downtime using Q and more uptime using auto attacks. Most Kennen players make this mistake. They dash in and blow all of their abilities at the same time. This is a problem because of his passive. Kennen's ultimate can only apply 3 charges of his passive, which stuns after 3 hits, but this works independently of his E, Q, W, and passive. Therefore, what you want to do is space out your spells. Let your ult stun the enemy, and then when that stun finishes, hit them with E, W, and Q to stun them a second time. On Kha'zix, you can throw your W and E on top of an enemy. You'll arrive just as your W does and receive the healing from it still. Here's how to predict where a mark will spawn on Kindred. There's a bit of a cheat sheet we need to look at. Depending on how many marks you have depends on where the next mark is capable of spawning, and a new mark spawns 45 seconds after the camp that the last one was on dies. So using this we can predict where the next mark will spawn with some power of deduction. Here, after taking the 2 scuttle crabs, my mark will spawn on either Gromp or Raptors in 45 seconds, but Gromp won't be alive in 45 seconds, only Raptors will. Therefore we know that our mark is going to spawn on the enemy Raptors. If you miss your Kled ult, fear not. You can still make use of the movement speed even travelling the other direction. The move speed you get for following the ult persists for a really long time even if you change direction, so you'll actually run backwards faster if you constantly change direction like this to keep receiving that move speed boost, more so than you would by just running in a straight line against it. When you die as Kog'maw and go into passive, don't just stand next to the enemy and explode. Do an auto attack. That's right, Kog'maw gets 1 melee range auto attack while in passive. I think this is an intended feature, and it does a lot of damage if you build full lethality like I did. On the Blanc, you're probably doing your combo like this, but this is wrong. Instead, you want to be doing your combo like this. Isn't that just the same thing? No, because in the second example, I use ult into W. But why does that matter? Well, when you put points into your W, it increases its damage, so after you get 3 points in it, your W does more damage than your ultimate does, because you only have 1 point in ulti. When you put the 4th and 5th point, you now do drastically more damage with your W than you would with your ultimate mimicking the W. That is all the way up until level 11, where you get another point in your ult, and now your ulti does more damage again. So, from about level 7 to 9, make sure that you're hitting enemy with W, not with ult mimic W. Here's a really cool style of new Lee Sin kick you can do. Usually when flying through the air with your Q, you can't use other abilities, but if you initiate a W to an ally and then reactivate Q before you get to them, this unlocks the ability to use Q and R while in the air. You can use this to basically drive-by insect kick someone into your team. Leona's bread and butter combo is Q into R. The exact duration of her Q stun lines up with how long it takes to cast her R and have it to land, so it'll always CC chain between the 2 abilities. Unless the enemy has tenacity, so make sure you're always pressing tab and taking note of what enemies have bought Merc Tread so you know if this combo will work or not. Here's the lineup to do an 1,000,000 point shot onto the side lane net as Lilia. After recalling back to base, take 1 small step forward to this point on the platform and then throw your E just next to the tier 1 tower. This will snake all the way up the lane dodging the inhib, the walls and all of the turrets to hit an opponent trying to siege onto your teammate. You can do this on top, and you can do this on bot. Lissandra's Q has a small cast time. Because of this cast time, you can use Q flash, and the Q will come out of where you land. But the better use is to do this with your E. Use Q and then activate the second part of your E. This means that you don't have to be standing still casting your E while in your opponent's face. You can do it before you teleport, and it'll come out instantly once you teleport forward, surprising them. On Lucian, your passive autos reduce the cooldown of your E, so if you use Q or W and initiate some auto attacks, you can dash before the autos connect and you will still have the E cooldown reduced. Using this, you can do some pretty cool combos to get off a triple dash in later levels. On Lulu, by putting your mouse closer to where you are, you can aim your Q pointing in 2 different directions. With the right aim, you can shoot 1 forward or 1 backwards. Okay, I'm going to be honest, this is completely useless. You're never going to do this in a real game, so here's a real tip. On Lulu, if you flash into the enemy and ult yourself, the knockoff from your ult is the perfect amount of time you need for your W to land and polymorph them. This is basically a guaranteed 2 seconds of crowd control on an enemy that they can't react to, so stop playing Lulu so scared. Get in there. Lux is one of the best champs at setting up cheating recalls in the entire game. When a new wave arrives, throw your E out onto the wave. Then Q the first 2 melees so they don't go out of it. That way you can detonate E on all 6 minions. Then throw a second follow-up E, and voila, the wave is dead. This allows you to start recall before the next wave out of base even spawns. From there you can spend the 8,000 gold that you saved up and run back to lane. And remember, you always get home guards out of base now, so by doing this trick, you can literally make it back in time for the arrival of the following wave. In later levels, before you Malphite ult in, press W. This will allow your W cooldown to start ticking down. Just before the W expires, ult in and hit an enemy with it, and then your next W will be back off cooldown because the cooldowns be ticking in the background. This allows you to get 2 Ws instantly, and if you combine this with Titanic Hydra, you can slap some people around. For Malzahar, we already know what the tip's going to be. Wait, how did that get in there? Sorry. Okay, on Malzahar, the tip is simple. R flash. Press R on an enemy, and use flash just as you connect with them, and you can do a super long range suppress from a way safer location. The knockback from Maokai's Q extends behind him as far as it does in front of him. It's also good to know that if you W to an enemy, you'll be directly on top of them, meaning that your Q will always throw them the direction that you aim it. On Master Yi, channeling W actually pauses the duration of your ult and your E, so if you're versing Morgana and she decides to make you go AFK, you can just channel W while inside the bind. That'll conserve the duration of your ult and your E, so when the bind ends, you still have your ult active and can chase her down and get revenge. Or get binded a second time. If I was to ask you what champion has the strongest smite in the game, you'd probably say something like Nunu or Evelynn, and you'd be wrong. The answer is Mel. That's weird, because Mel can't even ult a neutral objective. True, she can't, unless she's tagged an enemy champion. If Mel has hit an enemy champion, she's able to detonate stacks she's built up on Baron, which leads to this glorious moment here where I smite the Baron for 7,000 damage. On melee, remember that in a pinch you can use Q on a teammate. Using Q on a teammate causes them to get the passive enhancing the next auto attack, and if you took summon area on your runes, it'll also give them the shield of that rune. If you want to play for push level 1, try starting W on Misfortune. You can alternate auto attacks between minions, constantly resetting your passive and maintain 100% uptime on your W because the cooldown keeps getting dropped. With this, you get push versus anything. Mordekaiser's jungle is actually one of the fastest jungle clears in the game, because he can do this. By pulling the golem into the wall, you can essentially take red buff and golems at the same time. With a well-timed Q at the end when the golems break, you can even pick up all of the small ones. Starting at about 2 items, Morgana can clear jungle camps without even being there. Just bind her to put down a puddle, and put a second puddle for good measure while it chases after you. On Naafiri, you can cosplay being a terrible parent and send your dogs over a wall and use them to scout, either Q a neutral objective or blast plant them over. They'll try to path back to you, but in order to get there, they're going to give you vision of a huge area and check the whole river for you. Another thing I found out by accident is that if you stand next to a wall, when your dogs respawn, sometimes they spawn on the opposite side of that wall and can act as a scouting tool in the exact same way. Around neutral objectives, you generally want to throw Nami ult from inside of the pit. The problem with throwing ult down river like this is in order to avoid it, enemies will all shift down and stay together. If you throw it from a side angle like inside the pit like this, not only does the ult get masked by terrain, but it forces their front line to move forward and their back line to move back, splitting them up for a couple seconds and just essentially giving you free damage on their tanks. Nasus doesn't have a lot of mechanical prowess. One thing to note is that because his passive gives lifesteal, it's actually really good to maximize the autos you do on a minion and Q it as low as health as possible. Even if you inflict more damage than the creep has health, you still get the max healing from your passive, so sometimes you can sneak in an extra auto before queuing even if the minion's in range of dying to Q, that way you get more lifesteal. And try out Jak'Sho and Nasus. It's a really good third item because it amplifies the armor and magic resist you already gain on your ults. Just poke in and out of combat with W and E for a few seconds till Jak'Sho procs, proc your ult with it, and oh my god, look at my stats. Where do I even start with Nautilus? You can R flash to do an instant knockup, you can hook a wall and R to change its origin location, and a bunch of others. But I think the cool thing to touch on is what ability to max. If you look at Nautilus's W, putting points in his W increases the percent of his max health that gets converted into a shield. So when you're playing top or mid lane Nautilus, points in W are a lot more valuable since you're going to have a lot more giant spells in your inventory that you can convert into health with points into W. Whilst as support Nautilus, you probably just want to get the cooldown down on your Q, unless you're really fed. As Neeko, whenever you're hitting a tower, make sure to transform into a melee champion. This is because towers take 20% increased damage from melee champions, so you're just gonna have more damage to it. On Nidalee, you can cancel the animation of Cougar Form Q by using Pounce. You can also change back into a human while mid-pounce. Combine the two of these and you can do this really cool combo. This is me doing 4 spells in about 0.2 seconds. Playing Nidalee hurts your hands. Nyla's passive amplifies the amount of XP that both her and one nearby teammate get in a duo lane together. Because of this passive, with perfect CS, Nyla and her support get level 6 on the wave that arrives at 525. This can set you up for a really nice early dragon shortly after spawn, but what's interesting here is if you get just 1 kill in lane, that means you get level 6 on the 455 wave. So, perfect CS plus 1 kill equals level 6 before dragon. Don't ask me why you'd want to do this, but on Nocturne, you can ult champion icons on the minimap in order to fly to them. This year's changes to home guards were a really big buff to Nunu, since the movement speed he travels with his snowball is dependent on the movement speed he has when he begins to cast it. This indicator appears as you run out of base, and that signifies when your home guards will fall off, so make sure to start your snowball just before you get to this line, that way you'll travel way faster and can do nice lane ganks, or you can turbo in down mid with style. On Olaf, don't just use W as an attack speed steroid, use it as an auto attack reset. All of his abilities are really good to be used in between auto attacks in order to weave them in. So, with the W auto reset and combos weaved between autos, it should look a little bit like this when you do a full combo. It's important to remember in League that you can't see circular skill shots unless you have vision of the center of where they were cast. And of course the best use of this is with walls. Orianna can completely hide her ball inside some walls to the point where they can't be seen. And because enemies don't have vision of inside a wall unless they're playing Kayn, you can cast your ultimate on your ball inside of a wall and enemies inside of it won't be able to see it because there's no visual indicator. On, you can use your W into the wall at the back of Dragon Pit, and on the Hextech Sol map this allows you to take the portal from inside the pit. On Pantheon, it's good to remember that when you W on a target, you don't have to do the triple auto on that target. If you just simply walk away, you can actually carry the triple auto for about 3 or 4 seconds and use it on a secondary target, so you can gap close with W and attack somebody else with the damage. Also, it's good to remember that if you start an auto attack and W with the perfect timing, that auto attack will actually apply stacks to the next round of your passive, which means after the triple attack, you'll actually have 4 stacks instead of 3. On Poppy, you can use your W to stop the enemy getting knocked to safety after they eject from the Rift Herald, and better yet, they'll get ejected right next to the tower, meaning if you use the target champion only keybind, you can very easily slam them into your tower and get a free kill. Now for my favourite champion of the whole game, Pyke, and this is insane. Here we mouse over my Pyke ult and we see that it has a 100-second cooldown. Now I kill Nami with it, ulting her as she dies, giving me a reset that lets me recast it. I wait out the full 20 seconds for when I can recast it, and when it finally goes on cooldown, my Pyke ult has a 100-second cooldown. Now in a different situation, I get a kill on Galio with my ult. Then I instantly recast it on the floor, and my ult goes on a 100-second cooldown. We can see here that your ult will come up more quickly if you just use the ult to get rid of that second charge instead of letting it expire, wasting 20 seconds before it comes back up. But wait, this gets even more insane. Watch what I do here. I kill the Nami with my Pyke ult that has a 100-second cooldown. I then instantly recall during that 20-second window before it goes back on cooldown. I sell all of my items and buy 6 Kindle Gems. When my ult finally comes off cooldown, its cooldown is reduced by about a minute. I can then refund all those Kindle Gems to get my normal ult items back, and now I'm just left with an ult cooldown that is half of what it should be without sacrificing anything to my build. How crazy is that? Here's a reminder that on Qiyana, you gain bonus movement speed when running alongside the element you're holding. So if you walk into the river, and you grab the water element, you get 10 bonus movement speed while walking through the water. If you have the grass element, you get that bonus movement speed when walking through bushes, and if you have the rock element, you get it while hugging walls. So make sure when you run down river, you're holding water, and make sure that when you're running around in general, you're holding rock and hugging walls, and you'll just get around the map a little bit quicker. Quinn's E is special because she can use it to stop auto attacks from spells that usually make auto attacks go through no matter what. Think things like Garen's Q or Blitzcrank's E knockup. On Rakan, his E always places him on the opposite side of his teammate from the side he dashed on. This means if you need to get back to the side you started on, it's going to be quicker to double cast E than run all the way back. Another thing to note is that after you ult, you're unable to flash or use W for about half a second, but the max range that you can use your E on a teammate from takes exactly half a second to get to them, meaning if you pop your ult and E to a teammate at exactly max range, you'll always be able to instantly cast W or flash once you get to them, leading to really clean combos. Here's a brand new Season 16 Rammus play I don't think anyone's thought of yet. Remember how on Nunu we use the new home guards and that indicator on the ground to know when to pop our W? Well, Rammus's ultimate range scales with his move speed, so run out of base and pop Q and Ghost just before you get to that line, and then ult before you cross that threshold. You'll easily clear 2 or 3 screens and fly out and heal an enemy from Fog of War. I can imagine this to be really strong on Rammus jungle, or even Rammus top lane. On Rek'sai, you don't have to hit an enemy with an attack or a spell in order to mark them to ult. You can use summoner spells like Ignite or Smite, or you can use items like Titanic Hydra, or my favourite interaction is that burn items like Liandry's constantly refresh the uptime for when you can ult, allowing you to hit one spell and ult almost 15 seconds later. Most people already know on Rel that you can Q flash to catch an enemy off guard, but what if the enemies are split up and you can't hit both with one Q? Well, instead, you should use R-Flash. R-Flash in to group the enemies together, then follow up with Q into W, and it's a perfect CC chain they can't avoid, even if they aren't stacked up on top of each other, to begin with. Renata's ultimate has a really big wind-up, and it's super obvious when you're using it, so let's disguise that animation. Throw Q backwards and then ult. Your character will face the wrong direction, throwing enemies off. If you combine this with an R-Flash, enemies will be sure to have no idea what just hit them. There are 2 mechanical tricks you need to know on Renekton. 1, you can reset your auto attack timer by using W, and 2, you can cancel your W's animation by using ult. Combine the 2 to do an insanely fast one-shot combo that looks like this. It's pretty tricky to do, but Rengar can use this bush to jump into the Baron pit onto the Baron directly. The same can be done with Dragon, but you need a lot of move speed to do it. Now for the champion we're all here for, Riven. Now Riven's Q is an auto attack reset, meaning after you use Q, you can always do an auto attack. The problem though is that Q has a wind down animation, and during this animation, you can't auto attack. Therefore what you do is you click the ground between Qs. First use Q, then click the ground and click back on your opponent. Clicking the ground takes away the wind down animation and allows you to auto attack more quickly than if you hadn't. Doing a side by side, we can see that this is clearly faster. I'm able to do an auto attack much more quickly by clicking the ground between Qs than I would just standing still doing nothing. Here's why the optimal way to play Rumble is to spin around in circles like a lunatic. If I stand still and point my Q directly at this training dummy, it takes 161 damage over the duration. If I now spin in circles like a Beyblade using my Q on all 4 of these training dummies, what you'll notice is that this training dummy still takes the same amount of damage, I just deal damage to other training dummies in addition. So, playing Rumble in teamfights, spin around in circles like a lunatic. You'll do the same amount of single target damage just with the added bonus of area of effect damage. Taking Hex Flash on Rise is legit. You can use Hex Flash while channeling your ult. When your ult finishes teleporting you, you'll be able to teleport with Hex Flash as well. This is great because often people will aim skill shots at you as you teleport in, and this allows you to dodge them or scrape out some extra distance. On Samira, if you're dashing while channeling your ult, you can still use your Q, so a really useful combo is to use WER and then use Q while mid-dash while ulting. This saves you some downtime since you don't actually have to cast Q and wait for its animation. Oh, and just a reminder, you should use your E on towers. Whilst E doesn't do damage to towers, it does give you an attack speed boost, which will get you more plates. On Sejuani, if you want to maximize your damage, you should stun an enemy with E, auto-attack them to break the ice, and then ult them point blank. The only problem with doing this is that if you ult someone in melee range, the stun doesn't last as long, and you don't get the AoE slow effect, so if you want to maximize crowd control, stun the enemy with E, then take a step backwards to throw your ult from further away so you get that big effect. Or if you want to get the best of both worlds, you can do this crazy mind control combo that I just came up with. On Senna, each auto attack you do reduces the cooldown of your Q by a second, but if you buy the item Renan's Hurricane, this also applies to the bolts that you shoot out as well, meaning when attacking multiple targets at once, your Q cooldown will rapidly go down. If you think about combining this with an enchanter build full of healing and shielding power, you can dish out some insane levels of healing in later levels because your Q basically has no cooldown as long as you're attacking an enemy. The item Moonstone Renewer goes insane on Seraphine. Every target that you heal or shield will bounce a portion of that healing or shielding to a nearby teammate if there is one. The thing is, Seraphine's W heals and shields your entire team, which causes Moonstone Renewer's passive to bounce between all of your teammates altogether. This means when grouped up as 5, using W, you're giving 2 shields and a giant heal that is being bounced off all 5 teammates onto the other 4 teammates, and all of a sudden you end up with these massive shields the size of health bars. On set, when you use your E to stun 2 enemies, set will always attack the target closer to where your mouse is pointed. So if my mouse is closer to the right side of the screen, I'll attack the dummy on the right, and if my mouse is on the left side of the screen, it'll attack the enemy on the left. Using Shaco's ultimate, you can choose where to teleport yourself, as you'll always teleport to the side where your mouse was pointing at the point where you activated your ultimate. If you press your body up against a wall, you can use this to teleport across the wall, or if you point the mouse the other way, you can use this to stay on the same side of the wall and teleport your clone across instead. Another thing to note is that jungle camps in Season 16 have more health now, so Shaco can no longer clear his raptors using 3 boxes alone at level 1, unless you go into your runes and take Adaptive Force and flat health instead of scaling. The extra health and Adaptive Force actually increases the amount of damage your jungle pet deals. This means it's now yet again possible to clear the raptors with 3 boxes without interfering at all, meaning you can go for those 1 camp invades and just terrorize people like you used to. An important thing to know with Shen ult is that it will always position you on the side of your teammate closest to the nearest enemy to them. This makes it way easier to do a follow-up taunt after you teleport because you know where you're going to appear already. Another thing that's good to know as well is that the duration that your Q lasts is really long. So in lane, you can pull your Q, that will get the cooldown ticking, but also you'll have the passive. Then you can engage with taunt, do 3 autos, and by then your next Q will be up again, and you can do another 3 empowered autos, allowing you to do 6 empowered autos in a row in a very short amount of time. Here's a brand new Season 16 jungle clear that is a must-know for Shyvana mains. Start on your top side jungle and do a full clear down to bot side. Make sure to skip your buff and do your minor camp first and then come back to the buff. If you then make it back to your respawning camps on time and you take them all again on sequence, you will finish your second full clear just moments before the dragon spawn. This will give you time to walk into river, arriving at dragon as it appears, which is obviously super good on Shyvana because she's great at soloing dragon and she receives bonus stats for taking dragons. So this will help you get your dragon stacking started early and get that early dragon soul. Here's a Singed combo developed by penguins that you have to try out. When being chased by bear character, make sure to enter the bushes in order to juke them. Then begin TP to cause mass confusion. When the enemy finally figures out what happened, use flash to cause mental damage, followed up by Zhonya for mass effect. This will cause huge brain explosion, your opponent won't know what to do. Very important for this combo, make sure you don't skill Q ability, not necessary. On Sion, when cancelling your ultimate, it takes longer to cancel your ultimate by reactivating R than it does by using your Q. So if you're trying to use your Q mid-fight, make sure to press R, then press Q. You won't travel as far, you can end the ult earlier and inflict damage faster. The rune Presence of Mind is a must-take on Sivir. When you auto-attack minion waves with your W, the bounces that go onto enemy champions are going to proc Presence of Mind, refunding you mana on a champion that is very mana dependent. Also, it's good to know that sometimes your W can give away an enemy who's trying to lane gank in the bushes. If you see the ricochets bouncing off the wave onto them, you know that there's something going on in that bush you don't want to find out about. Check out this insane trick you can do on Skarner that honestly should not be in the game. Now, it's important to know that when you're traveling through a wall with E, enemies get this little indicator showing them where you're going to emerge from that gives them some time to react. But if while traveling through a wall you reactivate your E ending it, the wall will eject you on the side that you can most quickly pop out of. So, when you just pass the halfway point through a wall, end your E instantly, that'll teleport you to the opponent, giving them no time to react, and from there you can follow up with an instant ult catching them off guard. And do I even have to mention how absurd this trick is when you're using it on the edges of the map? Imagine how broken this can be as an engage angle when sieging onto enemies who are defending a tower in a side lane. Speaking of flying out of the map, Smolder can do the same thing with his E. This one's really useful when getting tower dived in order to buy time, since the enemies can't really hit you when you're flying off the edge of the map, right? It's also really useful around the alcoves. You can go in and out of the alcoves, snapping back into the map, and make it a really long way if you get the right angle here. Here's the most annoying combo that Sona can do that makes teamfights completely unplayable for enemy assassins and bruisers. This is the 12-second exhaust. Sona's W power chord reduces the damage an enemy does by 25% for the next 3 seconds, but it has an AP scaling, meaning in the mid to late game this gets well above 30%, putting it on par with the summoner spell Exhaust. When walking around, make sure your passive is stacked and W is your last ability used. Open by auto-attacking with your W power chord. Then spam Q, E, and W to stack the passive again, and hit them with another power chord W when the first one ends. Then spam spells to prepare your passive again and exhaust them as soon as that W power chord expires, to give them even more damage reduction. Finally, when exhaust ends, enough time has passed that you've now been able to stack up a 4th W power chord, and voila, you've now exhausted an enemy for 12 seconds straight. If you're a Soraka player, here's an awesome tip that will make you way more impactful in lane. Spam your E off cooldown to poke. The trick here is it's not really your E that does the damage, it's the combination of runes you take in the sorcery tree, like Airy and Comet, as well as Scorch and Mana Flow that will all cycle off cooldown. Soraka's E is undodgeable, meaning you can be laying down 150 damage guaranteed every 20 seconds, which will very quickly add up in a laning phase. Be wary though, this is more common to do when playing against other range supports since they can't snap engage to punish your cooldowns the same way that a lot of melee supports can with hooks. Here's one of the most tilting things you can do on Swain. In later levels when you have some points in your W, you'll be able to reach the enemy fountain with it. When the enemy is 1.5 seconds away from spawning, use your W on them. Getting hit by an ability will disable their home guards, and as you can see here, I literally managed to recall and run back to lane faster than my opponent, despite walking out of base 10 seconds slower because they lost their home guards. Here's a mechanic you can make use of on Sylas in order to dodge abilities. When you E onto an enemy, you'll get pulled towards them, but using W with the perfect timing will actually override this pull on your E and make you stop in place. This can be used to dodge abilities from enemies that you hook onto, because they're expecting that you're going to get pulled to them, but then you can override that with your W to cancel it. As a reminder, Syndra's W grants additional benefits when used on either red buff or blue buff. Using her W on blue buff will refund some mana and reduce the cooldown, and throwing the red buff onto an enemy will actually apply the burn from red buff onto enemies hit by her W, which is really good for clearing raptors in this case. On Tahm Kench, after spitting an enemy out with your ult, if you try to use your Q, there'll be a small window where they can either dodge or use flash to escape. The best thing to do instead is to wait for your ult to expire and use Q as it automatically spits the enemy out. If you do it with perfect timing, it looks like this. Even with the enemy Sivir trying to do all the rocket science she can to dodge it, it's simply impossible. This mechanic takes away that period where they can flash or use any ability, making it guaranteed your Q will land. On Talia, taking damage from an enemy makes you unable to use your ult for the next 3 seconds. But if you take damage from an enemy and haven't skilled your ult yet, once you level up the ability, you'll be able to use it straight away, so it's actually good not to put a point into the ability until you actually intend to use it. I think the coolest use of this trick though is using your ult in combat as a knock-up with your E. You can skill your ult mid-fight in order to use it straight away. Throw your E out before the ult connects, and your ult will knock them into your E, setting you up for a combo and dealing a bunch of damage on those pebbles. On Talon, here's how close I have to be to the second dummy in order to attack it. But if I use my Q on the first dummy, my auto attack range is extended for the next attack. This only works if you cancel the initial auto after using Q, so press Q, then press S, and now for your next attack you'll have a slightly increased auto range. Here's the most important tip for Taric that you'll ever hear. On Taric, every hit of your auto attack will add an extra stack to your Q, with each stack increasing the healing that your Q does. The only problem though is that putting points in Q actually unlocks those additional stacks, so if you only have 1 point in Q, you can only get 1 stack, and so on and so forth. The best thing to do then is to always put a second point in your Q at level 4. This is because between spells, Taric gets to do 2 auto attacks with his passive, and since each auto attack applies a stack of his Q, you need at least 2 points in your Q in order to get those 2 stacks. So put a second point in your Q at level 4, then you can go ahead and max E and come back for Q later. Teemu's Q blinds an enemy for 2 seconds, meaning they can't auto attack. His passive is that if he stands still for 1.5 seconds without taking damage, he'll go invisible. Therefore, if you blind an enemy and then just press S to stand still, you can go invisible right in front of them as long as they don't have an ability that can hit you, such as the case with champions like Tryndamere. Did you know the Thresher's Lantern has collision? That means that my favourite use of it is to throw it in this gap between the tower and the wall in Blot Lane, and it'll completely cut off this choke point and make it impossible to walk through. When sieging towers, you can just wait until an enemy walks past this gap, then throw your lantern in it to block it so they can't walk back. That'll set you up for a really easy hook now that your enemy has no escape. Oh, and since the lantern has collision, it can be used in really creative ways like this. This trick is just purely for the style points. On Tristana, if an enemy dies while you're mid-jump, you'll have to wait till you hit the floor before jumping again. But if you reactivate your Q while mid-air and get a reset at the same time, you can actually reactivate your jump without touching the floor. This allows you to do a double jump just like people do on Kha'zix, and man does it look cool. Have you ever seen an enemy with armor and magic resist this low? Yeah, I didn't think so. Welcome to how Trundle ult works. If you use Trundle's ult on an enemy, it steals their armor and magic resist. But if they have a temporary armor and magic resist buff, you're going to take way more than what they actually have. So when I ult Sejuani here, who has both her passive and her Aftershock active, I'm taking a huge amount of armor and magic resist off her. Then when her passive and Aftershock ends, she loses that bonus armor and magic resist, putting her into the negative since I've taken more than she actually has without those buffs. On Tryndamere, each auto attack you do will give you 5 rage, increasing your crit chance. But if your auto attack is a crit, it will actually give you 10 rage. Therefore, one of the best things you can do when you're high on rage but want to use your Q is to initiate an auto attack and then use Q. This will consume all of your rage, but because the auto attack has a high chance of being a crit, you'll be awarded that 10 rage after your Q, which will help you build it back up more quickly. Twisted Fate's W cycles through the 3 colors of cards at a consistent rate, but this always works in the background even if he's not using it. Blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow. So by counting through the colors of cards in the back of your head, you can constantly know exactly what color you're going to pull at a moment's notice, allowing you to do tricks like this. On Twitch, the obvious thing to mention is that you can Q and then go into stealth and recoil while camouflaged. But the cooler use is that you can actually do an auto attack before entering stealth, allowing you to hit an enemy and not get traded back on. You can expand this to include blast plants. This allows you to use Q to go into stealth and then hit a blast plant and fly over the wall while invisible. From the enemy's POV, someone on the other side of the wall might not even know you're there because they didn't actually see you fly over, allowing you to do some pretty creative plays. On Udi, you do more damage if you don't pop your empowered Q right away. Here I use my empowered Q and then do 4 auto attacks and I do about 1100 damage. Now I'm going to use my Q, auto attack twice, then pop empowered Q. This means I do 1300 damage as I'm getting the full effect of both passives and also an auto attack reset, meaning the combo comes out more quickly. So when engaging onto an enemy that you want to kill, the combo should look like this. Open with E, use Q, do the 2 autos, then use the empowered E for an auto reset, and that'll finish off your target really quickly. Check out this totally intended feature you can do on Urgot. Urgot's E doesn't actually take the mana away from him until after the dash is completed, meaning that in this situation where I only have enough mana to use one ability, I can use my E and then activate my W before my E takes mana off me, allowing me to cast 2 abilities when I should only have enough mana for 1. This can allow you to do things like turn a close fight when you're low on mana or crash a wave in time after getting a solo kill, despite the fact that you shouldn't have enough mana to push it in. Did you know on Varus you can pop 4 stacks of your W passive with E? Now normally you can only put 3 stacks of your passive on a target at a time, but if you throw your E out and do an auto attack before your E connects, it will still pop that 4th auto attack even though it landed after the E did. Check out what I just did to this poor Twitch. How insane is that? Welcome to the Houdini Vayne combo. What you want to do is pop ult and enter stealth just before you hit the edge of your opponent's max vision range. If you combine this with movement speed enhancers like Home Guards or Ghosts, this allows you to get right on top of them before they even know you're there. Veigar can use his E in order to manipulate the wave. If your wave won't crash in time, you can just stun the enemy minions in order to halt them so that your wave has time to walk into tower. Oh, and there's also this funny trick, of course. The biggest must-know Vel'Koz tip that you probably already know is that his Q range can be extended by throwing it sideways. This is because of Pythagoras theorem, and angles and triangles and all of that crap. But the cooler tip that most people don't think about is that his Q actually refunds mana if his Q kills the target that it hit. Now, since this Q mana cost is only 40, but killing an enemy with your Q gives back 20, you can actually gain mana if your Q manages to kill 3 minions. So you can actually use enemy minions as a way to farm your Q. And what makes this even better is if his passive kills the minion, it still counts towards this mana regeneration as long as it was the Q that applied it. So W the minion wave, and then use Q on the casters. In later levels, you can pretty reliably get that triple multi-kill on your Q, and you'll actually gain a cheeky 20 mana for doing so. Vex can use her ultimate in order to follow global ults and teleports all the way across the map. Just reactivate it as the enemy TPs away and you'll fly across the entire distance of the map and be able to follow whatever roam they went for and clean up afterwards. One of the most common mistakes that people make on Vi is using auto E. Now, using your E as an auto attack reset does increase your DPS, which is good, but you're forgetting about one thing. The item Sundered Sky. This is by far the most built item on Vi. Sundered Sky is by far the most common item built on the champion, and what it does is enhances your first attack to be a guaranteed crit. If you auto E, you're wasting the crit on the auto attack, but if you E first, you'll do less single target damage, but the splash damage from your E will be a guaranteed crit that will be hitting all secondary targets. So, against a single enemy you can use auto E, but against grouped enemies, you should just be using E to get them all with the crit. Oh, and of course Hwei can do some pretty fun stuff with her flash. Check that out. Don't you hate it when you're trying to farm your wave and the enemy Volibear ganks you from stealth? Yeah, me too. But that's not Volibear. That's actually Viego. On Viego, if you throw your E onto a wall just before you possess an enemy, you can actually run through your own shroud and stay invisible while taking the form of an enemy. This lets you catch people off guard, posing as a champion that they wouldn't expect to be invis. Or, what I find to be slightly more useful, after killing an enemy, you can use it in order to break contact because you can jump back into your shroud, bring it to stealth, and get away. A hidden effect of Victor's ultimate that for some reason isn't listed anywhere on the ability bar in-game is that his ultimate cancels channeled abilities. So if you're versing something like a Misfortune, Xerath, Jhin, or a Vel'Koz and they're channeling their ultimate, ulti on top of them, and it will just nullify their ult completely. On Vladimir, when his red Q procs, you have a very small amount of time to use it before it expires, but by channeling E, you can actually pause this timer, giving you more time to get in range of a target to use your Q on if you aren't. Oh, and it's worth mentioning, you can use Protobolt while inside your W. You need to stop using Volibear's ultimate to gap close. It's one of the highest damage abilities in the game. 300 base damage at rank 1, and a 250% bonus AD multiplier and an AP multiplier. You need to start using it in conjunction with your Q. The stun from Volibear's Q will CC chain long enough that your ult will be guaranteed to land, so when going to engage on someone, do a combo like this. Flash Q, ult on top of them to get the guaranteed damage, and that will all but one-shot anyone. Warwick's W has a cast time, meaning he has to stand still in order to use it, which isn't very convenient when they're in the middle of a fight. But the good thing is, the animation can be cancelled by using his Q. Use Q and then use W while inside your Q. This allows you to cast W and get the bonus attack speed while mid-fight without having to miss out on any attacks. Here's a hidden mechanic on Wukong that almost no one knows about. Each time you deal damage to an enemy, the cooldown of your Q is reduced by half a second, and this means that while spinning in your ultimate, your Q cooldown will rapidly diminish. Just look at how many times I can use it here. The big secret here is that this half a second refund applies on every enemy hit by your ultimate independently. Now that I'm hitting 4 targets at once with my ulti, watch my Q cooldown. It's back up instantly. This means that level 6 all-ins on Wukong are actually going to be far stronger if you fight inside of an enemy minion wave, as every minion hit by your ultimate is refunding half a second of your Q cooldown multiple times a second if they get hit with your spin. On Xayah, your feathers can't stay inside of a wall, meaning if you ult on the edge of the map, all of your feathers will clump up in a pile right next to you. By doing this, you can sometimes set yourself up for a feather pool that your opponent will have no time to react to. It doesn't actually say this on the ability bar in-game unless you press shift to show more info, but Xerath's Q actually refunds half of the mana if you don't complete casting it, so don't feel inclined to always have to throw it out if you want to conserve some mana. Here's a combo you can do on Xin Zhao that technically shouldn't be possible. Now Xin Zhao's ultimate, when he uses it, will push enemies away from him. That is, of course, unless the enemy is marked by his passive. Now there's a few ways to apply Xin Zhao's passive. His W will always apply to an enemy hit, and so will his E in autos, but his E in his autos specifically will only apply the passive if he has skilled his ultimate. What this means is that you can use your E as a gap closer, then skill your ultimate, that way you can push the enemy back with your ultimate since your E hasn't marked them because you used it before skilling your ult. This allows you to do some pretty cool insect plays that otherwise shouldn't be possible. Check out what Yasuo can do on Raptors. This is a really easy to replicate way of dashing through them. Just go into this crevice here, E the big raptor, and then E the small one next to it, and it'll take you all the way over to mid lane, which is a really great way to catch your opponent off guard if they're trying to get tower damage. On Yone, you can use the knockback from Dragon to redirect your ult. You can also do the same thing with the charge from Rift Herald. Alright, let's give you a more useful tip than this one. Yone can actually redirect his Q to hit multiple targets, even targets in different directions, by timing his flash. Yorick has a funny interaction with the item Hollow Radiance. The ghouls that he summons when they kill enemy minions will still proc the item, meaning you can just send a couple ghouls down a lane, and if you've built this item, they're going to kill enemy minions and splash that Hollow Radiance damage and push the wave really quickly for you. The biggest thing with Yunara is that you want to make sure that you're using your spells before you use your ultimate. Your W and your E will both have their cooldown reset when you ult and will be usable again. The same thing is true for when your ulti expires, so make sure you use your WE before your ult ends, because once it does, they'll be back up again. The biggest mistake people make on Yuumi is they try to use their ult to deal damage and slow the enemy, but it's actually a way to just heal your teammates. Not only does your ult directly heal the teammate that you're attached to since you're hitting them with the ult, but it also applies your passive on every wave of your ultimate that hits an enemy, so by hitting an enemy with your ult, you're healing your teammate double at the same time. So don't use your Yuumi ult until your teammates are at least half health, and you'll top them up pretty quickly. Zaheen's E is a dash that does damage once he lands. If you use it as max range, you're going to be stuck in this dash animation for a long time, at which point you can't perform any actions. Therefore, use a short E. By using E on top of yourself, the dash will instantly complete, apply the damage, and you'll be free to keep fighting. So, in a committed fight, do a short E to maximize your damage without self-stunning. Check out this insane Zac drive-by combo. On Zac, you can't cast any abilities while traveling through the air with your E. But if you Q a target, then use E, the moment that your Q breaks while traveling through the air, you'll regain the ability to cast your ultimate, meaning you can hit enemies with your ultimate while flying through the air with your E, allowing you to do some pretty cool plays. A mechanic that's easily forgotten is that hitting ZE on an enemy will refund part of the cooldown of his W. This scales, giving back more cooldown depending on how many enemies are hit. So if your W is just a few seconds away from being up, don't feel like you have to wait off to engage. You can go in, hit the enemy with E, and your W will come up right away. This Seri combo is absolutely insane. If your Zap is ready, open with Zap and use QEQ in quick succession. If you do it quick enough, it will actually cancel the dash from your E entirely, allowing you to do all of these attacks in just a fraction of a second without having to wait out the dash from your E at all. On Ziggs, you can't use W into E since the bombs from your E will arm too late and it will only hit the enemy where they land, not where they travel. Instead, throw your E onto the ground and then W your enemy through it. They'll get hit by all the bombs along the way and take way more damage. Here's how to do your Zilean combo faster. What you're probably doing when you double bomb an enemy is you're using Q, then W to reset the cooldown of your Q, and then Q again. But this is slow. Instead, use QQW. By pressing Q a second time, it will actually queue up that ability to be used once you reactivate your W, meaning you can throw out your bombs faster by using QQW than you can by using QWQ. Can you make sense of what's happening in the Zoe combo? Because there's actually a really high level combo to guarantee that your bubble hits. Normally when you throw Zoe's bubble, it looks like this. There's a large wind-up animation of her throwing her E, which gives delay to it coming out and enemies time to dodge. But if you immediately activate Q2 after throwing your sleep, the sleep animation will be overridden and it will actually come out instantly, allowing you to get sleep off more quickly. And when you put it all together, you can do a combo like this to instantly sleep an enemy without them having any chance to react. On Zyra, she has a hidden debuff that isn't listed anywhere in the game. You literally cannot find out about it unless you go on the Wikipedia page. And even then, it isn't listed on her Wikipedia page, it's listed on her plant's Wikipedia page. When your plants attack a target, only the first plant will deal full damage. All subsequent plants attacking the same target will now do 50% damage, meaning one of the biggest things to know about Zyra when poking is never commit 2 plants in order to poke your opponent. Just spawn them one at a time and keep one in reserve, and only worrying about spawning multiple at once in a life or death situation or in big scale fights. And there you have it. So it turns out 172 champions is a lot of champions, and the scale of this video was way bigger than I imagined for. So I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something new. And of course, we have to say a final thank you to the video sponsor, War Thunder. You can go play the game right now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox or mobile using my links in the pinned comment and video description. And remember, for new players and those of you who are returning from a break of at least 6 months, you'll also receive a massive bonus pack which includes multiple premium vehicles, in-game currencies, and more. So thank you to War Thunder, and a big thank you to you as well for watching. Have a great day, everyone.